welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, how dare you, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a coffee, Patreon, crypto and thanks button in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and X. Now we are joined by Neil, Click OK, Sensual Goat, One Deck, Arthur B. Flat, Jin, and a whole bunch of people in the Flat Earth Debate Discord server, so welcome one and all.
How are you?
Hello, good morning.
Hello.
Good morning. But what time is it? What time is it? What time is it?
2 p.m. UK time, which is the standard time for Flat Earth Debate.
Perfect time.
I've actually been tempted to push the show forward by an hour to 3 p.m, but I never have. So it's kind of always been 2 p.m, and at the start of Flat Earth Debate, I did have two slots. I'd do one at 9 p.m, and I'd do one at 2 p.m. And what it ended up being was the live show had better participation from the American audience in the morning. That's to say, the early birds from the States tended to be better participants than the latecomers. So you get dross and trolls in the late show when I first started doing the show. And sometimes I'd do two a day. And then I thought, well, if I have a couple of different slots, I can figure out which one will be the best one. And 2 p.m. UK time ended up being the best slot, in my humble opinion. It also meant we could get the very late Aussies. So we get a wide or a diverse mix of people at this particular time. The Aussies just before they go to bed, the Americans are just getting up. We're in the middle of the day here in the UK. And obviously everything in between.
I think that comes from Americans being morning talk radio kind of people.
It could be that. I don't know. I don't know the reason why. Like I say, I just fiddled around with the different times that I could broadcast at and then picked the one that was the most successful. Because I could, obviously, I'm self-employed. I can go live whatever time I like. I can do what I like, really, within reason.
You covered every angle there, didn't you, Nathan?
I did cover every angle. I was listening intently to the discussion in the pre-show, which was fascinating, to be perfectly blunt. And I enjoyed it immensely with you guys talking about how evergreen is flat Earth. And I didn't want to interject at the time because I wanted to see where the conversation went. But what Surf Daddy was actually describing is a choice that you get to make as a flat earther. So at some point, when you come across this subject and you realise that Earth is measured flat, you then have two choices. One is become a debating ninja. And that means learning every single aspect of what we call housekeeping questions, so you can overcome Glober's objections to the fact that Earth is measured flat. The alternative being, you realise and appreciate that Earth was, is, and always will be measured flat by everyone in all circumstances, and then you just get on with your day. Once you know the truth, there isn't a great deal for you to do unless you're hell-bent on actually educating others who disagree with you. Now, if that's not your bag, then from that perspective, it's not an evergreen subject for you. That is to say, you don't need to keep looking into how flat Earth gets measured each and every time it gets measured. Once you know it's measured flat, there's nothing more to do. You can get on with life. You don't need to hang around here watching my show anymore. On the other hand, if you did want to become that debating ninja that across the dinner table from a loved one can shut down the supposed, suggested argument for a ball, then you need to stick around and listen to all the arguments, or buy my book when it comes out, or learn more about the subject in general, so you can reach that point where you can overcome all of the arguments that might be presented to you. And arguments are only, generally speaking, coming from people who are living in fear of the actual reality that we're faced with. Your average normie isn't in fear of measuring Earth flat. They'll just measure Earth flat and get on with their day without giving it a second thought. It's only when someone comes along and says, well, shouldn't we be measuring it globe-shaped? That they might suddenly have a bit of cognitive dissonance. But for the most part, anybody who's sailing, navigating, flying, making maps, cartographers, those people aren't too concerned with how flat they measure Earth when they establish a horizontal baseline for a measurement. When the flight formulates a descent path with a triangle and a horizontal linear flat Earth measurement of distance, they just do it. They don't go, shouldn't I be doing this on a ball? No, they don't care. It's only us in this little pond where we are preordained to argue with one another. That's to say, the other being the ballers in the same pond as us. But for the most part, as an audience member, you do just have those two choices. Either get on with your day. Now you found out the truth. Earth was, is, and always will be measured flat by everyone in all circumstances. There's nothing more for you to do. There's no need for you to argue. And if you do choose to take the other path of arguing, then you need to become an absolute debating ninja so that you can overcome the seeming arguments from our opponents. But those are the only two choices. As for it being evergreen, it's absolutely evergreen. I think it was Sensual Goat in the G Plus panel that said in the pre-show, it's evergreen as long as there's a heliocentric one world religion. As long as we are taught in the early classrooms that Earth is a ball flying around the sun, then there'll always be a place for me as a flat earther making this content. Now, I think what Surf Daddy was suggesting in the pre-show is summarised by the notion of flat Earth being a debate, by having all conspiracy roads lead to the subject of flat Earth, so that most of what is discussed isn't actually a flat Earth subject. It's just a means of ridiculing the person who's putting out the idea that you can believe in Earth being flat, when in reality, to believe you're on a ball, you must measure Earth flat. Yeah, interesting discussion in the pre-show. Check it out if you're a member. If you're not one of my members, maybe consider becoming a member. It's dead easy. It's a couple of bucks. Or if you don't want to become a member, you can always subscribe to the second channel and then you can get the uncut and after show for free. A little bit down the line, maybe a couple of weeks after it actually gets recorded. But either way, all the material's eventually free to all. Go ahead, Neil.
We've been neglecting housekeeping for the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, because the more I work on the book, the more I appreciate how redundant housekeeping is. So, housekeeping is there to keep alive the arguments from the ball side that we've overcome. But as I say, through writing about each one of those housekeeping questions, you appreciate that given that all roads lead to a flat Earth, you then ask yourself, why would it be necessary to argue about where a physical geometric sphere edge for a horizon resides when it's measured in the mathematics below surface level that's measured, with parallel eye level that's measured, with a height perpendicular to a plane of reference that is measured, when you've got several flat Earth prerequisites in the calculation that enables you to have an argument about where the horizon should reside but cannot reside based on the modus tollens argument formulated 5 years ago, you appreciate the redundancy of the questions that we're asking in housekeeping.
Very good.
Neil, your throat sounded really dry then. Is that because it's dusty in here?
What was that?
Oh, it doesn't matter.
Anyway, it is redundant. So, are we gonna get rid of the housekeeping questions?
No. I mean, no matter how much I would like the fact they are redundant to be prevalent, won't alter the rinse and repeat nature of our opponents. No matter how much I would like to suggest that because Earth is required to be measured flat to assert a distance to a geometric physical horizon, therefore redundant, it won't alter that both flat earthers and globe earthers alike want to, at this stage, argue about the distance to a geometric horizon. They want to. It's been described in previous shows as people wanting to sniff their own farts make themselves feel intellectually superior to the next man when it comes to a dissemination of the claim to be evidence offered up by putting flat earth values into a calculator that facilitated a begging the question fallacy. Now, for many years, we've been describing it as a begging the question, proof of nothing, perspective hijacking earth curve calculator. But if it's begging the question, how is it doing that when it's utilizing measurements? Well, it's doing it by having a physical geometric sphere edge horizon reside below the surface level you measure. So as I say, to have a housekeeping question about the geometric horizon encourages the audience to partake in the feast of nonsense where I'm trying to dissuade them from doing just that. Once you know Earth is measured flat, why do you need to know where the distance to the claim to be geometric horizon used to be when one guy says, you know that building over there, we're seeing too far because the building's a slightly looming non-standard refraction holographic projection from behind the physical geometric sphere edge horizon below the surface level we must measure when we calculate distance based on a height that we've also measured perpendicular to a plane of reference. Therefore, we're not really seeing the building, it's actually a mirage. Let's calculate how much refraction is involved in said mirage. Now, if you can go through that over the course of 45 minutes, the undiscerning onlooker might see you as being quite intellectual. But me, I'm the next man. I just go, there's a building. I see it because it's there. There's no explanation required. And if you want to start measuring the distance to the building, you'll be measuring it flat. If you want to start measuring your height above the surface level, you'll be measuring it flat. If you start wanting to take those two flat Earth measurements and suggest there's a geometric horizon below the surface level, you will require that your eye level be parallel with the surface level. Ergo, there is no possibility of making the assertion as the first man did when he suggested that a building is a slightly looming, non-standard refraction, hologrammatic projection of a building from below the reified physical geometric sphere edge we acquire through mathematics that only functions if we measure Earth flat.
I suppose you can see, Nathan, well said as well, that, you know, for example, the geometric horizon housekeeping question, we can see how now we'd answer that differently. At one point, would be explaining the 1.22, above 1.2, the observer's height in feet. And then we've got proof of that with the black swan imagery. That can't be true. But like you've just said, now we don't need to go there. We can go there, which is fine. But you can just point out that the distance to the geometric horizon, which has never been defined as geometric, was calculated after measuring eye level above surface level parallel to each other. It required a flat Earth to get there in the first place. So you can see how we deal with the question differently.
Precisely.
Yeah, I did like the housekeeping questions, though. I think, as the start of the show, it did help the show a lot, I thought. Especially if you've got newcomers coming in, to the arguments. Always assuming that people are coming in that are new all the time. Introducing the housekeeping questions is a nice standard to keep, I think.
I disagree
Even if it may seem
fundamentally,
redundant.
Jin, but that's kind of why you're here, to put that a view. Maybe you don't realise your place in this forum.
Well,
that's what you're here for, Jin. Go ahead,
I
Eli.
kind of agree fundamentally. Jin was just, I think he was alongside me in the English hub server when I was talking to this one guy from Singapore, and he had an air of arrogance, a sense of nationality, and I kind of used that to my advantage, like his boasting of his IQ, to hold him to logical fallacies, and it actually held. Like, he conceded and genuinely went away with a different perspective, unless he respawns later in the week and I catch him. But I don't feel like that was the situation. So there are two different questions. How is it not a globe, and how is it flat? And the way I chose to respond to that was because the first question was, why don't you guys believe it's not a globe? And I went into the black swan, and he was like, okay, that disproves that it's a globe, but how does it prove that it's flat? I was like, well, that's a different question. And then I took him into the trigonometry that goes into landing and ascending planes. And after that, he tried to wiggle into, well, how would that work on a sphere? I was like, well, you asked me how is it measured flat? This has absolutely nothing to do with that. And with the resources I gave him, I said, do you see any ball in there? And he's like, no. I was like, exactly. That's what you asked for. That's what you got. So you got, the debunking of the globe, and you got the validation that it's measured flat. So all the other questions came based on knowing that, not resetting. Now, based on what you guys are saying, it would have been definitely much better had I also showed him how the calculator utilizes the Earth is flat as well. That I did miss.
But you've got to know all of the above, haven't you? What you're pointing out, Eli, and you're absolutely correct, is that in order to negotiate that very, very uneven terrain, metaphorically, with your opponent, that is not the ground that we're standing on that's measured flat, but the uneven terrain of debate, then you do need to be, as I put it, a debating ninja. You need to know the fundamentals of the housekeeping questions so that you can respond appropriately when someone puts something to you from a predisposed position that they are automatically on a sphere. If you understand, you can then take them through, as you put it, the black swan, and say, well, if Earth was a sphere, as you automatically assume it is, then every distance to the geometric horizon could be no more than 1.22 times the square root of the observer's measured height off a flat Earth. Distance to horizon in this image, the black swan, is beyond the physical geometric limitations of an Earth sphere radius 3959 if we measure the distance along a horizontal and a height above surface level with a parallel eye level, and infer that there's a geometric horizon below the surface level to breach and violate with this image. Now, what I'm doing is incorporating in the flat Earth prerequisites that are part of the mathematics that infers we've got a geometric horizon that can be violated by the black swan, but simultaneously incorporating in how flat Earth must be measured to make the assertion that we're debunking. Now, it's all well and good for me to sit on my pedestal and say, we don't need these arguments, they're redundant. There's always going to be a certain place for them. So from that perspective, to answer Neil's original question, yes, we'll do housekeeping. No, housekeeping won't die. But is it necessary? Absolutely not. And my current shtick requires me to point that out, rather than go through the housekeeping questions like nothing's happened. In the last 2 years, we've collectively come to the realization that most of the arguments, if not all of the arguments, were, number one, not really arguments because they required flat Earth measurements, but number two, put in place so that it can make our opponents on the globe feel like there's hope. So long as there is an argument, then there's a chance that they could still be right. The minute we stop arguing, there is no hope anymore for our opponents. There's only the flat Earth measurements.
Are there any new housekeeping questions that would come up using the current rhetoric or arguments? Sorry, like it is very redundant as I'm thinking of it. It's like such as any evidence you can take an elevation angle without a flat baseline.
We've already got that. Any evidence you can acquire a elevation angle measurement from a curved baseline?
Yeah.
Negative.
Sorry.
I was going to say, isn't that the latest one that was added to the housekeeping? Was that one, wasn't it?
Yeah. So we've already got
Like
that.
probably
as part
like
of
2 years
housekeeping,
ago. Yeah.
But we're encouraging the suggestion of debate. Is there any evidence that you can acquire a horizontal baseline from a curved adjacent? Is a misnomer, a contradiction in terms. But again, it allows the opponent hope. Well, maybe there's a way of getting an angle from a curve. Let's just see if we can figure this out, because we are on a curve and we must be getting angles. We use them. It's like the second part of that statement is the only bit that's really relevant. we use angles when measuring Earth. So the fact that, it must work from a curve because you believe you're on one? No, how flat Earth measurements function is just how they're acquired and function. Getting them to work leads me nicely into the suggestion from Eli, which is you being asked by the baller, well, now we know we've got these flat Earth measurements. How do they work on a ball? He asked you, correct?
Well, they don't. That's the answer.
Yes, that's what
point.
Eli said. Yes.
But why is it necessary to ask that question? Because
Yes.
the opponent's seeking hope. He's got hope in mind when he asks you, well, okay, I appreciate that we're requiring horizontal baselines for elevation angles for the sake of this discussion. How can that work on a ball? Well, that's what we're doing with housekeeping in the same format. Any evidence you can acquire a horizontal from a curve, why would we infer that there's a possibility with the question when we know that we just measure elevation angles off a flat baseline? Just state it as fact. Earth gets measured flat with horizontals, distances and angles. That's how it is measured. What's that? How does it work on a ball? Get lost, you stupid numpty.
Just spit
Maybe
the
it could be
facts, right, Nathan?
expanded. Sorry. Maybe it could be expanded, like without the use of tangents and without measuring from a place that's impossible to measure from, such as the equatorial plane. I don't know.
But I mean, the horizon's not a tangent. It's just the horizon.
I mean, you could ask, is there any evidence of that Earth curve is being measured within the Earth curve calculator? But that's a little bit twisted because it's called the calculator for a reason. It's calculating curvature. It's not measuring it.
Exactly.
Nathan, was pitch data not the most recent housekeeping question?
Yeah, any evidence you can have pitch data on a globe? And you're like, why would you need to ask that question? It's demonstrably demonstrating how flat Earth is being measured in all of that data. The angle is pitch up with respect to the horizontal. Again, you point that out to a baller and they go, well, how does that work on a ball? Well, horizontal bends, right, is their answer. Why encourage them to defy an axiom with the question? Why say, is it a possibility that this horizontal can bend? When you're defying an axiom in the question. Why give them that lifeline?
Right. Kind of like when you got, I say you guys, I mean, I've done it too, but like, what's the first one? Any evidence to the distance of the sun? You ask that, then a glober chimes up, and next thing you know, you're arguing for 45 minutes about if radar will bounce off the plasma or not.
Well, not necessarily. With any evidence to the distance to the sun, that's in a way one of the only reasonable questions. We don't know what the sun is, and we don't know how far it is. So it seems perfectly reasonable to ask that question. Any evidence of the distance to the sun? Now, if you're a baller and you, again, with hope in mind, try and appeal to flat Earth elevation angles, you can see where this is going. You can then point out, well, no, your alleged distance through Keplerian motion scaled by Huygens requires you measure Earth flat. So you're violating the base principle measurement of the angles and of the distances to infer sphericity, to then scale it by Christian Huygens value when observing the transit of Venus. But that scale has a curve beneath the feet of the person who's just measured Earth flat. To track the stars, to track the angles, to create heliocentric motion in the form of Keplerian mathematics. So you can't violate the base principle of the measurement you took in the first instance to suggest that you can scale it with a curved baseline when you've measured Earth flat to achieve that. Again, we're offering up hope where it shouldn't be. We should cast out all doubt in our audience's mind's eye when they come across this show. They should be left with the two choices I gave at the beginning of the show. Either appreciate that Earth is measured flat and get on with your day. That means you do not engage your neighbour over the fence when he's mowing the lawn. and saying what a beautiful day it is on this lovely green and blue planet. You just have to nod and go, yeah, yeah. In the same way as if somebody starts talking to you about Ganesh or Vishnu, you just have to go, yeah, yeah, and be tolerant of their religious belief, as opposed to start correcting them. There is no necessity to do such a thing unless, and this is really the key to this, you are in fear of your own ignorance. That's to say, knowing that Earth is measured flat still leaves you with the question, but how could that work on a ball that I still potentially could be leaving on? Then you are the person who's in fear, and it's your ignorance that really needs addressing, not your neighbour with the lawnmower. But most people don't like addressing it as themselves and their own fear of their own ignorance. They'd rather project that fear onto the next man that brings it up in discussion, or happens to mention something that uses a globular reference in their language. But in reality, that is most individuals' own fear of the subject manifesting in arguments. Now, where am I getting this from? 10 years of experience doing exactly that. My fear, my concerns manifesting through argumentation with opponents. Now, I don't really have any fear about Earth being flat. That's just how it's measured. So when someone comes along and starts talking about tangential planes, I could get angry with them. I could get annoyed. But moving forward, I just don't see the point anymore. I don't need to manifest my fear onto the opponent because of his ignorance. I don't feel as ignorant as I did 10 years ago. And life's simply too short. So even though I obviously run a show about flat Earth debate, the projected manifestation of what I suggest the audience should do should be in how I behave. And a sort of calm demeanour to, well, it's just measured flat, let's get on with our lives, is what I want to say, while simultaneously contradicting that by running a show. As weird as that sounds. But it is evergreen. We'll be evergreen until the heliocentric paradigm fades into obscurity. Probably through death. We need maybe 1 or 2 generations to die out and then be replaced by people who are more discerning and have had the education in flat Earth presented to them as we are starting to now. But that will come with time. So that's the other path. You become a debating ninja while people are on the outgoing path of heliocentrism and asking these questions of you. You do have to become their guru temporarily. But it means you've got to know what you're talking about. But the housekeeping's useful still. Also useful to point out how each and every single question directly relates back to an Earth that is and always will be measured flat. So when asking any evidence of the distance along a horizontal plane of reference to a geometric physical sphere edge horizon, formerly known as Earth curve, measured off surface level with a parallel eye level only possible on a flat Earth, could be the way I start to ask the questions moving forward. We'll see. Same goes for axial rotation. If you're going to describe the alleged effect of Coriolis, that's a pseudo force of things curving as they traverse an inertial reference frame observed from you on a rotating, non-inertial frame of reference, then both descriptions require a flat plane of reference to be rotating in the example. Earth is still measured flat even in the nonsensical, convoluted world of Coriolis deflection. On a ball? No, you're describing a flat plane of reference rotating. But even in their nonsensical examples, they still need a flat Earth to be measured.
Oh yeah,
wild.
tough guy. Well, what about molten iron core? Let me see how you're gonna do. What are you gonna do with that?
Derive the radial value to acquire a sense of having a molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth. Where's the presupposition derived from, Neil? A measurement of radius at the minimum of Polaris, or a calculated dip value as per Al-Biruni by measuring perpendicularity with a mountain, a distance that's horizontal, and an elevation angle off surface level to give you the height, to calculate the dip, to extrapolate out radial values, to give you a point that you can suggest has a molten iron core, in the heliocentric paradigm. So you still need to measure Earth flat in 3 different ways, or one way if you're just going to do it with Polaris, to infer a central point with a central radius based on a flat Earth measurement, or 3.
Well, I got one. Any evidence there's a 24-hour sun in Antarctica? What are you going to do with that? Oh, shoot, that wasn't a housekeeping question. That's right.
No, it's not a housekeeping question. But I mean, if you say, is there any evidence of a 24-hour sun in Antarctica? I'd say, yeah, sure. When they went down, I mean, horizontally in a southward direction, they measured Earth flat with elevation angles to the sun for a 24-hour period, allegedly, and then presented some rather shoddy, very sketchy-looking imagery of the sun rotating about their position whilst they all measured Earth flat. But does that alter the southward direction being planar? Does it alter the journey being with respect to a plane of reference in straight and level flight? Or the descent towards Antarctica requiring a triangle be used for the trig in the calculation of descent with a horizontal distance measurement? All of the above means that Earth was and is, as is suggested, and will be throughout the rest of the show, as a flat plane to arrive in an area and then see the sun for 24 hours? Okay? Now, the more time elapses, the more shady what was done in Antarctica, allegedly. That's why I keep saying allegedly. Seems. As you step back from it, you go, this looks dodgy. The whole thing stinks. But even if it didn't stink, even if it was 100% legit, and you could say, I put my hand on heart and firmly believe that they did film a 24-hour sun in Antarctica, in the south, after travelling across the flat plain in straight and level flight, measured off sea level, and then descending towards their landing site with calculations with horizontal distances, to only lay out their equipment with respect to an equatorial plane that is flat, and then measure elevation angles off a flat baseline. Would it alter the 5, 6, 7 different flat Earth measurements that was required in order to put themselves in a position to add speculation about why we would have a sun doing something? Who cares? If the sun does rotate about your position in a certain region for 24 hours, if every single measurement up until the point that you arrived there was off a flat plane, it becomes an anomaly that I can't explain with a map. I wasn't attempting to.
Yeah, just jumping the gun again. They've always jumped the gun, haven't they? Skip past the angles. Let's talk about the sun in the sky for a certain amount of time while we're measuring the elevation of it from sea level or surface level.
Imagine for a moment that there was a place on Earth where the sky was red instead of blue. An anomaly, a phenomenon, you might say. And you say, well, the reason is because of the red shift of the sun at the distances when we're in this location. Because we are on a ball, light that traverses through our atmosphere, sphere-shaped air, shifts to red. Therefore, we're on a ball. Now, that's no different to saying, well, if we have a light that moves around our position in a certain area, therefore we're on a ball. No difference. Whereas if I say, well, why is the sky in that instance red rather than blue? It has absolutely no bearing on why the sky is the colour it is when you get there, and utilising the sky as a red colour rather than blue colour to suggest that the world beneath your feet is ball-shaped. I'll still have to travel to that area in straight and level flight. I still have to descend and land using horizontal distance measurements and trig. So what difference does it make? The journey to the location that the sky is observed to be red will still be flat Earth prerequisites in all respects, regardless of the phenomenon being observed when you arrive.
I mean, I know there's nothing, but the way I'm going to word, there's very little in the way of, well, there's nothing in the way of globe Earth measurements for any sort of presentation for anybody to offer you, ever. and what they do offer you will not be measuring Earth curvature. They will explain that as they try to explain it to you, and you can point that out. The curve comes mathematically. It's a calculation after that measurement. That's how it's always been done.
The only thing they give you is straight line horizontal tangents. It's like when they say tangent, that's just a coping mechanism for how not curved that they're measuring it.
Yeah, but like I said the other day, a tangent is it's not tangible. It's a mathematical concept. When they start mentioning tangents with navigators at sea, they don't have an extendable tangent in the pocket because it's not physical. A tangent line, it's mathematical. You can use it on a computer screen. Yeah, in these different aspects, you don't carry one round. It's not physical, so you can't use it on the physical ground as your horizontal baseline. That doesn't happen. It's ridiculous to think it does.
As you already point out, that's an apologetic for how flat you're measuring. What's a tangent? Well, it's a line, but with an assumed dingleberry dangling from one single point on that line. But what are you actually utilising and measuring? Well, you're measuring the line. What's it represented in when you're navigating? Well, it's the surface. So the line, if you call it a tangent, is the surface, not the inferred, non-measured ball dangling below in their fairy tale. You're just measuring the surface as a flat plane and then calling it a tangent after the fact. But then you're not measuring from the surface. You're inferring tangency to an imaginary ball. But we do, in fact, measure the surface.
Yeah, that's exactly why it's one of the 30 words, tangents, in there.
Yeah.
And you can deal with it a few ways. Yeah, but what do you want a horizontal line for? You're measuring curvature, aren't you? Tangents, not tangible. So, it's not physical, it's a mathematical concept. You can deal with it a few ways, but if they want to use it, they will be using a horizontal baseline.
I don't
And
want
a
to
tangent
necessarily...
point isn't... Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't want
Nathan.
to encourage them by asking how ball-shaped things could be possible, hypothetically speaking. They're saying, well, how would you acquire a measurement of sphericity? Can you give it me, please? Again, leaves hope in the mind's eye of the guy who's arguing. Because he's then going to go, well, I don't know how, but I'm sure there's an answer out there because we do live on a ball. Therefore, you leave him with ignorance, but still with hope. Well, just because I don't know how it's done doesn't mean we're not on a ball. It just means I'm ignorant of how it would function on a ball. Then they go away, do a bit of research, come back and say, look, tangent plane. Like, we're just measuring the plane bit and not the tangent bit. The bit that's acquired in terms of measurements are from surface level. That's why you're apologising with a tangent plane. But for the fact that I asked you how curvy the measurements are, and could you provide them, they wouldn't have necessarily, the hypothetical individual in this scenario, have gone away to look for an answer to an impossible question. The reality being, we know how it's measured. I don't need you to toddle along to try and find an explanation when we already know how it is and can only be measured.
Yeah, I was just going to say that a tangential point. Sorry about that. A tangential point is not horizontal, by the way.
Go ahead, Jin.
It's just a point, isn't it? It's not a horizontal, is it? It's a point. So what are they saying, Well,
they're saying that the ground is representative of their ball faith with a single point, when in reality the surface level is what is measured. So another way to put that, Jin, is so we're not measuring your ball then.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly my sentiment.
Go ahead, Vaxi.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, once they mention tangent, they're not, I mean, you just said it a second ago, you're not measuring a curve, then you're measuring one particular horizontal point that you're calling a tangent.
There is no such thing as a horizontal point.
Yeah, you can't measure a horizontal point. What is that?
Yeah, I know. Well, that's what they claiming a tangent is a horizontal point on a curve. But there is no curve because they're using a tangent.
No. Horizontal's horizontal. It's a line if you're describing it in a dimensionality or an aspect. A tangent is a single point, but what we're measuring is the surface as a level. Well, what that means is it's just not your globe surface. That's all it means.
Exactly.
But it's locally flat.
Yes, it is. That's correct, Len.
Locally flat for everybody simultaneously.
There was a time where I would have been triggered by that suggestion, because you get so caught up in the argument, sniffing your own farts and trying to seem like an intellectual, that you feel compelled to correct your opponent when they say things like, well, of course we're measuring it flat, it's a really big ball. Now, if you have to stop, take a breath, and say, let's just break that sentence down. Yes, of course, we are measuring Earth flat. Full stop. Because I don't give a crap why, because we are ipso facto simply measuring it flat. Now, if you want to apologise for how ball-shaped it is not, by saying, well, really big balls are flat, number one, no. One of the defining characteristics of a ball is that it's got a lack of flatness. And number two, they've already defined the position that is true in their first statement. Yes, we're measuring Earth flat. Well, that's the end of the discussion then. We're measuring Earth flat. Not because it's a really big ball, just because your ball belief is being superimposed onto how Earth actually gets measured. The second part is irrelevant to the first part. What are we doing when it comes to measurements of Earth? We are measuring it flat. What's that? Because you've got a faith, you say the reason we're measuring it flat is because it's a ball. That makes no friggin' sense at all. And is irrelevant to how we measured it. Flat.
That always troubled me, that it's so big that all of a sudden it becomes flat. What, on a computer screen or on a movie like Men in Black, when they zoom out, right? And then all of a sudden this globe becomes flat? That will never happen in reality.
No. It would be very obvious if we were ball-shaped. Rory Cooper, my perspective, 10, 11 years ago, pointed this out. If you've got a ball beneath your feet, then it is immediately apparent that that is the case. For example, but not limited to, the distance to geometric horizon when measuring Earth flat and inferring sphericity is 1.22 times the square root of the observer's height in feet. That means Earth curve would be immediately apparent, and more so as you raise in altitude. What actually happens? You increase the angle of view, the diffraction limit becomes less severe, the horizon extends into the distance. You can see further and you go higher because you have a widening of the angle. Those are the realities that we face. How is it described? Well, it's described by measuring Earth flat, by utilisation of angles. That's how we describe perspective. And that's the view that we are and do only encounter. The ball-shaped nature of a world we never inhabited would be immediately apparent. It would be very obvious. And you'd be able to measure it. We don't. We actually measure Earth flat. Why? Because it's a really big ball. No, not really. 3,959 miles as a radial value isn't very big and would be immediately obvious. But how do we suggest this? Well, we suggest it by measuring Earth flat. So I would suggest that if we're going to have sphericity, you're better off not measuring Earth flat to infer it. Because I'll just come along and go, so we measured Earth flat then. And I'll be 100% correct. The fact that as a ball believer, you need to reverse engineer the reality of a flat plane we actually live on into a ball that you say cannot be measured because it's really big. Well, no, it's not. You've got predetermined sizes of your sphere ball, but your calculations still get derived from flat Earth measurements. Why would that be so? Just measure it ball-shaped if it's ball-shaped. You don't, you measure it flat.
They're in fear. Go ahead.
It's okay, Neil. Go on.
I was going to say, I put a picture of Master B. My brother sent it to me in a text, and people are very afraid because of this Atlas alien supposed thing, this Manhattan-sized interstellar object, 31 Atlas, accelerates and turns bluer. Possible signs of alien engine. Okay. And in that picture, in the little picture above, in the right-hand corner, you have our solar system. So I just text back to him. I said, John, do you really think that there's dirt in the sky? This is what you believe, that right now, where you're texting me from sitting in your house, that you are actually in outer space? That's where the dirt is? People are afraid.
Just fear porn. Be afraid. Be very afraid. And meanwhile, the inferred heliocentric motion that this is based upon was created by the Roman Catholic Church by way of flat earth measurements, wasn't it?
Also, Nathan, the photograph you took of a lighthouse at the Isle of Man debate, I think that's clearer than this picture.
Yeah, what is it with this crappy picture quality? So what's this supposed to be? Aliens coming to get us? They love to scare the living daylights out of their minions, don't they? With this crap come from fields like NASA. Who owns all the telescopes? Oh yeah, is it still the Roman Catholic Church? Yeah, it is, isn't it? So this has come from the church. The church is trying to scare you with lights in the sky.
You're missing the main part. Manhattan-sized. Do you know what you're talking about there, Nathan?
How'd you get the scale to give you the size of Manhattan in the sky? How'd you scale it? Is it with Kepler and Huygens and orbital motion? You'll need a flat Earth to measure, to violate, to give you that scale, to give you that Manhattan-sized object. So, no. Why are they trying to fear? Why is it they're using little lights in the sky to make you think that there's aliens coming to get you? Is it just a new way of scaring people?
It's also keeping the heliocentric mathematical so-called model alive in people's minds, isn't it, as well? You know, people who would just presume that live on a globe flying through space, which is what we're all taught. This just backs it up a little bit for them.
Yeah, no one's looking at the measurements and saying, I wonder how we came to extrapolate out this picture in the top right-hand corner of a world that is alleged to be in an orbital motion. Okay, so we've got the sun and we've got us and Mars and Earth, and we're moving on a flat orbital elliptical plane around the sun. Notice how the line, even this tiny little crappy diagram, bifurcates through the Earth. Yeah, that's because the motion on this elliptical plane is centered around the equatorial plane inside the ball. No matter which way you dice it, even in these diagrams, you can just about make it out as teeny tiny. But Earth is a giant protractor with a line bifurcating through the Earth so that you've got north and south hemispheres. Well, where's this line terminating for the measurements to create this entire system? Well, it's terminating in hell. Why? Well, so that you can work this functionally from a North Pole-centric Polaris-derived system measured off a flat plane. That's how it works. Not describing the motion from the outside edge of the ball. That's the outside edge of the latitude grid in the northern hemisphere that starts this system off. Well, you need a flat plane to measure it, so that Kepler and Huygens can put it into this motion and scale it to then tell you that this is the size of Manhattan. Once you know the trick, once you see the wizard sleeve, you no longer live in fear of this nonsense coming to get you. It's just a light.
You could say all roads started from a flat Earth.
Yeah. To derive that motion, you need this. This is an expanded view of what I've just described. You've got the Polaris grid being created with a flat Earth prerequisite elevation angle. You've got the globe Earth being described as a giant protractor with a map painted on top of it. Where's this angle terminating? In the centre of the ball. What's this plane of reference part of when you describe orbital motion? Well, it's the Keplerian derivative scaled by Huygens working functionally from the centre of hell. It's where the angle gets measured. Is that how we measure angles? Are we travelling down to the molten iron core to get these angles? No. What are we measuring? Well, we're measuring a flat plane and then wrapping a ball around it. That's why the line will always traverse through the centre of the ball for orbital elliptical motion scaled by Christopher Huygens, so that Manhattan-sized rocks can be described. Well, where'd you get the size? How do they know? Oh, because you can see how big it is compared to other things. How do you know how big the other things are? Well, because we saw how they were scaled when we have an occultation of one light in front of the other. Well, how do you know how far that light is to scale it for the size of the light? Well, we know because we've got orbital motion given to us by Kepler. Well, where did we get orbital motion given us by Kepler before we got to scale it by Huygens? Well, by measuring a flat Earth to give us the angles to the stars. That's how. Obviously. So we start by measuring Earth flat and then wrap the protractor that we measured for a Polaris-based system around us as though we have a protractor, and then we paint on that like it's a dome with a map on it, like the latitude lines. Why would we do that? So we can put it in motion around the sun? All right. It all sounds very religious. It's because it is. It's come from the Roman Catholic Church.
No one is ever physically measured from the centre of Earth.
You can't.
Well,
we measure a plane and we have a system wrapped around us at 0 degrees and 180 in front and behind, and at 90 above our heads. Always with respect to the plane you are standing on. Now, you can suggest that 90 degrees above your head is the top of the North Pole, if you're sat at Polaris, with zenith position notwithstanding. Well, you can create a ball that way, but it means you're still standing inside the ball, not on the ball. You can never stand mathematically on a globe Earth. No such beast exists for the description of heliocentric orbital motion. You can only ever be inside the ball, never on it.
They've been doing it for thousands of years, apparently. I mean, that's exactly what Eratosthenes did. He measured the flat on the surface, got his 7.2 angle, and then he took it down to the centre and drew the segments out from the plane in the middle of a circle or sphere to then calculate the circumference of Earth when he did all his measurements on the flat horizontal surface.
Yeah. So back to the original statement. Once you know that, if you're a cursory watcher, onlooker of this show, once you know how Earth has been measured in all instances and without exception, just get on with your day. You don't need to become a debating ninja. You don't need to tell your neighbour that Ganesh isn't real, that he shouldn't believe in the many arms of Vishnu. Just say, oh, right, that's very interesting. Yes, praise be to the heliocentrism you believe in. And then get on with your own lawn. Life's simply too short. But we have to deal with it. We have to deal with the projected fear of our opponents. And that's really all it is. The people who come to us that need the debate to continue need it to continue so that they can have a fighting chance of of their belief still remaining true. You know who you are. The people who come to my comment section who want to fight all day.
I was just going to mention them, Nathan. I've been chatting to some of them from the show last week, and they're saying, well, about the debate, and there's no debate, and Nathan saying there's no debate, and we need to keep the debate going. I said, well, bring them in, but I mean, for the conversation. I said, but all we get at the moment now they also are realising how Earth's measured. They don't come here to talk or go over the factual measurements and evidence. They just come to disrupt the show and ad hominem attacks. That's what we've got. That's what we're dealing with now.
Yeah. So you can describe how Kepler utilizes a Polaris-centric system measured off a flat Earth to create the ball. Opponent from the ball side comes in and says he's not measuring the ground. In which case you can only point out that you're in the hard place of denying your own flat Earth prerequisite measurements that you utilize to create a ball for you to believe in. What's that you like using them? The ground is being measured. Then the ground is being measured flat. What's that? Because it's a really big ball? No. The plane of the equator, in this instance on screen, is still a plane. And it is still what you will require be measured to create your ball. So it's not like it's curving because it's a really big ball. It's manifest in its flatness when you take a measurement from it. The ground, that is.
I mean, I've had a couple, and they've been doing it a while. You don't understand your maths. And, the Earth was calculated. Eratosthenes did calculate the circumference. Yeah, he did. You're right, mate. He did calculate it. That's exactly what I did. I understand calculations. I understand math. And I also understand measurements. And in the first instance, he measured Earth flat. Then you got your calculations for your sphere.
Indeedy weedy. Yeah, that's not going to necessarily do my numbers any good, saying, no, you don't need to hang around. But I'd rather do that than say, you know what? Earth's flat, but have you heard about this amazing thing called psychopathy? Let's talk about narcissism.
Well, Nathan, I know something that'll get you, going good. I heard there's a book coming out. How's it coming?
Yeah, it's going all right. I mean, it's a lot of stress for my wife at the moment. She's just got too much on. I feel really bad asking her to do it, to be perfectly honest. The only saving grace is that people have been sending me money via PayPal. So if you, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, have sent me money by PayPal, know this. Every penny of it's gone to my wife. Because she put herself in a position where, rather than doing overtime for her own job, she's taken on the task of transcribing all of the videos that I recorded so that I couldn't be bribed and blackmailed by thieving sods who attempted to steal the 5th draft of my copy and then blackmail me with it. Well, fortunately, I recorded the whole process and are now having my wife transcribe that process so I can go through, analyse how boring it is, and then make it juicy again.
These thieving suds came out with anything recently?
Don't know. I've lost all interest. I don't care. I got a message from Brian yesterday saying, "Oh, Adam's got a message for you," and I didn't even bother replying. I'm like, I've got better things to do. I don't care anymore. I mean, when I suggested that there were certain deadlines in that regard, I meant it. Now life goes on. I don't care what they have to say. I couldn't give a crap what they do. It's inconsequential to me now.
Well, I take the advice of Michael Corleone when he said, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. So Kiwi does a 30-minute show, some old show from way back in the day, does not respond to anything in chat, unless, of course, someone actually has the audacity to say that EJ from 24/7 has taught more people about flat Earth than Kiwi, then he'll respond.
I mean, more power to him again. Life goes on. I wish them every success, but they're just inconsequential to me. So, great, good for you. On with your life you go. But as far as I'm concerned, all they've really done is given my book a juicy ending. Everyone loves a good betrayal story. But that's what they've offered. Rather than being the gurus that they wanted to be and having my book be a swan song for them, They've become thieves that betrayed their own. And that goes into an anecdote at the end of the book. And is it juicy? Yeah. Is it true? Yeah. That's what people want, right? Ricky Lake and Jerry Springer.
Yeah, that's not going to look well for those two, is it? It's not going to look well for those two. If that's what you're going to put in the book.
Well, so what?
What a way to enter the book. What a way to enter the book.
In the book,
Wow.
I've got a story of meeting Antonio Subratz, Patricia Steer, and Robert Shortman in Oxford. And Robert Shortman's story arc results in a defiance of his first-hand account and testimony in the form of TFE. Patricia Steer's story arc is a baller in the waiting who was claimed to be a man by her former fiancé Antonio Subratz, who treated himself with Rick Simpson oil and died of cancer. Those are the stories of the people I know. And as much as people might go, well, that's right out there, right? That's pretty outrageous. Yeah, it is, yeah. People come and go from my life, and along their interactions with me, they've got interesting story arcs. Now, will the people who've betrayed me also have an interesting story arc? Yeah, definitely. Was Patricia Steer influential in her day? Absolutely. Same goes for Antonio. Same goes for Robert Shortman. Same goes for Bob Nodell. Same goes for David Weiss. Any of these people who have got anecdotal information about them are serving as exactly that, anecdotes that I can pad around how Earth is measured flat. How many different ways can I say, you know what, Earth's just measured flat, so get on with your day? Because once you know that, you only have to look at any Earth measurement to see how flat it is. But also, Antonio Subratz claimed Patricia Steer was a man. So, I mean, which one's going to get you to put the book down? If I just say, well, Earth's measured flat, thanks for reading. Or, Earth's measured flat, but in the process of trying to find our way to that information, we had to go through the process of learning what the azimuthal, equidistant, North Pole-centric globe projection functioned as a map with timeanddate.com, as hosted by a woman claimed to be a man by a guy who died of cancer, after being led by a guy who spent 18 months in Antarctica denying the Antarctic 24-hour sun, measured off a flat Earth. You see how much more interesting one is than the other?
Absolutely. I can't wait for the end.
Well, in the end, the people who gave us information about the scientific method betrayed their friends for a mention on the cover of a book.
Ooh, that hurts.
Yeah, it
And
does,
you know,
doesn't
you
it?
said something the other day. Wait, you said something the other day, and you tried to play it off that you've been hurt before, and you mentioned Patricia Steer and others. She didn't spend 7 years on your panel, though. She did not take you through the scientific method. She was not your mentor. So as tough as you want to portray yourself, Nathan, you know, let's call facts facts. This one hurts.
Not really. I'm more fickle the more time goes by. So, the guy that I was introduced to, or was my introduction to the space fakery via telescopes, was a guy who I used to live with back when I was at college, who was one of the tutors at my college. Very good friend, housemate, who I lived with for a significant period of time. Spent endless hours in the company of him in front of the TV because he was living with me, along with other people. It was a shared house. But Robbie, his name was, immediately reverted to the rhetoric of Goon Hilly showing him the lunar lander on the surface of the moon on television sets. Well, he was immediately defending that rhetoric. In other words, flying in the face of the research I was doing at the time. Now, I got annoyed with him. And like I said at the beginning of the show, because of my own fear and ignorance projected onto him, He's arguing back because he's feeling self-assured in his position that Earth's a sphere because he's been shown the lunar lander on a TV screen alleged to be presented via the telescope that you see at Goonhilly. Giant, great big telescope is the thing that's giving you these images. Here's the lunar lander on a TV screen. Therefore, we definitely went to the moon. We're definitely in heliocentric motion. On you go, kids. Now go and look at this next exhibit. Well, it turns out, no telescope on Earth could see, even in the scales that they give us with heliocentric derivations of flat Earth prerequisite elevation angle measurements, Kepler and Huygens orbital motion, all of which proves beyond all doubt that Earth's been measured flat to create this nonsense system. But when you're in the begging the question fallacy without realising that, you can still demonstrably show that they're lying about what they presented to kids. In this case, my housemate, presumably in the 70s or 80s. Well, presenting that nonsense tosh to kids has a long-lasting effect. It's only later on in life when you find out that it's all lies that you can start a journey of discovery that leads you to the awful truth that Earth was measured flat all along. And your ignorance and fear of not being able to see the lunar lander on the surface of the moon with your own eye through a telescope that isn't capable of seeing the angular resolution at the distances they assert through scales acquired through flat Earth measurements. Not knowing all that just gives me an anecdote to talk about Robbie O'Hare, my former housemate. Robbie Davidson, someone else who I might talk about. I didn't have many interactions with Robbie, actually, other than him inviting me to a conference and then later retracting said invitation because Bob Nodell told him he didn't want me there. Not a particularly interesting story, but just, again, a certain sense of betrayal. You know, somebody bigs up their own conference, wants you to come along, and then over my dead body says Bob Nodell, so, actually, Nathan, you know, we invited you along and we were going to buy you a ticket to come to the conference. Well, no, we've decided not to. That was Robbie Davidson's interaction with me. Well, what did Robbie Davidson end up doing? Giving up his channel to TFE?
Duffy.
Yeah, to Duffy.
Turned out to be a baller all along.
Yeah. So, again, my fickle nature when you're like, oh my God, these people gave you the scientific method. Yeah, they did. How critical is the scientific method once you know that it's a category error that's being utilised to prove Earth's a ball in the mind's eye of someone who alleges flat Earth measurements without realising they're using flat Earth measurements and then calling them science? As an example, you go to Antarctica, you fly in level flight, descend, land with horizontal distance measurements, set up your tripod and measure the Earth flat for a 24-hour period. I've got to go on camera, haven't I? I'm not really ready to do this, but where's my clicky switch? I just won't bother. I was going to say, unless you're Dave McKeegan and then you can't cope with your own tripod. But once you've got all of those preordained flat Earth measurements to suggest that you've got a 24-hour sun, what difference does it make to the guy who's literally just coming across this subject matter and realising the awful truth of the origin of all these measurements? What difference does it make to that guy? It's just a convoluted gaggle screw to confuse you, isn't it? Right, we've come up on the hour. We're well past the hour, actually. Anything anybody wants to add before I round out and we move to the after show? No? With that, I'll say if you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Premiering Streams, then stay tuned as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, if you are watching this live, this is where we bid you farewell. So another massive thank you to all of you who liked, commented, shared, subscribed, joined as a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and all that good stuff. I've been Nathan Oakley and I will see you all in the next video. Oh my God, the sky is falling. We're all going to die. Oh no, it's the size of Manhattan.